I've been talking about postpartum doulas for so long. When I first started offering postpartum doula services, we're talking 15-ish years ago. It was unheard of. No one even knew what that was. And I wrote letters to all the doctors in my community explaining what a postpartum doula was and how it could be helpful. Now, we can't keep enough doulas staffed in our agencies because it's so popular and has grown so much. But I used to have to teach what it was, in my little window of time.
Yeah. Oh, that makes me so happy. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Spoil Your Baby podcast. I am so excited today to have Stefanie Antunes here. Stefanie is a master doula, an OG doula, I think, pretty much. Doula trainer and owner of Doula Canada. She was my birth doula trainer, and I still have your voice in my head all the time because I think it was only 2 or 3 days we spent together, but huge impact. You're a very gifted and special teacher. So welcome. I'm so happy you're here.
Happy to be here.
Thank you. So I remember we all went out for lunch during our doula training, and I was sharing with you, this is like, I think it was about 10 years ago now, maybe 9 or 10 years. I was sharing with you about the book I wanted to write and the work I wanted to do. And I remember your comment was like so inspiring and, built so much confidence in me when you said that the way that mom and baby connect at birth really does have a huge impact on their relationship after birth. That stayed with me for this whole time. Can you tell us more about that?
You know what I think is really funny about that? I've said that to people a lot in my life, and people who often have a strained relationship with their child, and they go, "Huh." And then they think back to their birth and they're like, "That tracks." But who wouldn't be surprised by that comment is any farmer. So if you look for mammals, and if you look at farmers, there's always like that runt of the litter. And a farmer once told me that, so he raised pigs, and he said there's always that runt and it kind of gets shoved over to the side. And if he takes that runt and he puts it at the teat, that runt will still not make it. But if the runt finds its way back together, that it does okay. And I've thought often about that story and that experience that we have in those early moments and how impactful that is. And we hear a whole bunch of all kinds of stories in the mammal world. You look at animals in a zoo, and if an ape needs to have a cesarean, bring that baby back to that ape, and they have to work harder to establish that connection. Why do we think that happens in the mammalian world and then not for human mammals, right?
Yeah,
And so that early time is really, really important. And of course, not to say that someone that has their baby by cesarean can't bond well with baby, but we do work harder at it in those instances. And thankfully, we're cognitive beings. And so we're able to then learn and do the things that we need to do. But when it happens just really smoothly, it just happens more easily for a lot of people.
It's amazing. I think just the fact that birth is so impactful, that in itself is like a huge realization for so many people, right? Because it's for so many people their first it's like their gateway into their emotional world, into their embodied self, into like needing safety and knowing about it. And, so many parts of like our humanity come out through pregnancy and birth. And, when you say that experience has a huge impact on you and your baby, and it has a huge impact on the relationship, so many of us, our culture is like pretty checked out of that, emotional world and the importance. And they're like, it's just one day. Like, great. Like last Friday and not, whatever, I'm over it. Like, get over it. Right.
Yeah, so is our wedding. And yet, ...
Yes, exactly. And it's that emotional, like those emotionally intense experiences. Those are the ones that are really carved into us, right? In our memories and our experiences.
It's really interesting that you talk about an embodied experience because one of the things I've changed the most in my career as a doula, and I think has made maybe the most impact, is really looking at the embodied experience that someone has and their connection with their inner world. And a lot I spend the majority of my time with people prenatally
Mhm.
talking about that. Because if someone can connect with their inner landscape and they
Yeah.
understand, oh, that feeling that I feel right here, that's anxiety. And that feeling that I feel down here, that's instinct. And I talk a lot about listening from your head, from your heart, from your gut, and how that feels differently. Because when people are connected with their inner landscape, then they're not letting the head run the show all the time. Right?
Yeah.
And the
Yeah.
head, oh my gosh, there's so much information and there's so much to learn and there's so much to think about and there's so many people telling us things. And if we can distill that as pregnant and new parents and just say, yeah, but what do I really feel about this? I know what I'm thinking about it. It's easy to look at those thoughts, but what do I feel in my heart as a longing? And what do I feel in my gut as an instinct? And how
Mhm.
can I isolate the difference between those and make a decision when they're not in alignment? Right?
Yeah.
Because, and I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but thinking about that early period postpartum and how often we see people say, oh, I just want to do this with my baby, but other people are telling me XYZ.
Yes. And if we can look in instead of out, that makes the whole difference, right? I love that you're doing that. I love that. And I mean, that's been such a theme in everything I've been exploring and writing about recently is how motherhood and fatherhood, parenthood can be a coming home to ourselves and be a new, like it is a birth, right? We do like our birth as a parent. We go through a transformation physically, emotionally, identity, right? All of the things. Um, and it's this opportunity to like, feel our whole humanity, like to really learn it, right?
Yeah.
Which again, I think most people are like, why didn't I learn this in school? But
I know. And I think too, one of the reasons why we're able to better connect with that part of ourselves is that nature is strong. And our natural inclination in pregnancy and in new parenthood is to protect our baby. And so, more than in any other time in our lives, is we have this propensity to just like, like, oh, but I feel like I should do this.
Mhm.
I feel like I should do that. Well, yeah, that's nature trying really, really, really hard to bring out those inner instincts. And I don't know how we got to this point, but that we need permission.
Yes,
People need permission to just listen to their instincts, to trust their instincts. But we put so much focus in the head being the one to call the shots. We forget that actually our body is very, very smart.
absolutely. Yeah, even as you were just talking, I was even just thinking of like vocalizing in birth, right? Even that, even though like your body is like, do it, do it, do it. It's, sometimes as a doula, we have to like give our client permission
Yeah.
to let it rip, right? To let it all come through.
Yeah. It's
Which again, probably is one of the biggest jobs a doula does, right?
yeah. Mm-mm.
Yeah. Yeah. That's incredible. So we kind of said like, so if birth kind of is as undisturbed as possible, supported, right? Birthing person feels safe, supported, whatever situation it's in, right? What is the statistic now on births? Is it still like 95+% hospital generally in North America?
And depends where we're talking about Canada or US. Canada has higher home birth rates, obviously, than the United States does.
Actually, I'm in rural Ontario now, and the midwives they rule birth up here, and so there's a lot like the default is home birth here. Actually, it's just pretty cool. Yeah, yeah. So that's good for Canada. Love that. But still many, the huge majority are happening in the hospital, and there's obviously all kinds of different hospitals, all kinds of different providers, all of these kinds of things. But many parents are coming up against obstacles in the hospital and things that do disturb birth in a lot of ways. So, you know, when things kind of happen undisturbed, the connection is more free to flow. Can you say more about the impact of disturbed birth on the mother-baby connection, the parent-baby connection?
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, two of the people who, of course, talk about this the most are Michelle Audin and Sarah Buckley. And Sarah Buckley's research so much around the hormones of birth and just the impact of disturbing that. And it fundamentally, we know that it changes the hormonal physiology of birth, right? Well, why does that matter? Well, because the hormonal physiology of birth and early parenthood is around the release of a hormone that actually then has other actions, right? It does other things. In labor, we know that the release of oxytocin is going to give us contractions, right? And contractions is both going to help us in terms of dilation and then also in terms of expulsion. And then after that, in terms of the contracting really firmly to prevent hemorrhage. So I would say that the hormonal physiology of labor is really, really important, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Beyond that, it's thinking about, okay, well, what else do we need? Well, we know that endorphins help with coping. So when someone is able to actually feel pain and perceive pain, right, the receptors are like, oh, whoa, I better do something about that, that our brain then releases more endorphins. So more pain, more endorphins, more pain, more endorphins. Well, endorphins, we think of them as helping us to feel better, but they're not only helping us, they're also helping baby. So why might baby benefit from endorphins in labor? Well, think about the constriction baby's getting with every contraction is a bear hug around the baby. And as the baby is coming through the pelvis, of course, as there is overlapping literally of their skull plates, elongation of their skull to allow them to fit more easily. I mean, that can't be that comfortable, you
Definitely.
know? And so there's
Definitely.
a lot of things going on for baby that could benefit from endorphins. And literally, we could break this down with every single hormone that's being released and the purpose of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Some of it is mothering hormones, right? Some of it literally in every stage is mothering hormones. There are so many hormones too that release right before we go into labor. So in those last few days before we go into labor, there are hormones that help to mature our baby's lungs. There are hormones that actually reduce the amount of oxygenation that the baby needs. Why
Mm-hmm.
would reduced oxygenation be important for a newborn? Because they get reduced oxygenation in their birth, in their labor.
Yeah.
So a baby that has fewer oxygen needs will fare better through labor. But these are hormonal interactions that happen on their own at specific times, and one fuels the other, fuels the other. And all of this together creates a birthing environment that is likely to be the most effective, the most safe, right, for everybody involved. And yet then there's just so many things that come in and can cause conflict in that. And being disturbed, being watched, being observed is one of the things, of course, that causes the most impact because we're mammals at the end of the day. And I mean, again, any farmer will tell you a lot of mammals don't really like to be interfered with when they're in labor.
Yeah. And rushed, right? That was the other thing that's really, really common, right?
Yeah.
Thinking about those hormones that you mentioned get released right before birth, that would not happen with, aggressive inductions and all kinds of things like that we see, right?
Right. And one of the things we're seeing now is the early induction at 39 weeks, where we used to be seeing weights of closer to 41, at least, 41 and 41 in, sorry, yeah, in like 3 basically was what we used to see. So 10 days past the due date. And now we're seeing these inductions at 39 weeks because of the ARRIVE trial. And gosh, there's so many hormonal things that aren't happening, right? In that early induction period.
Yeah. And then we're seeing worse outcomes for baby, like maternal and infant health,
Yeah.
right?
And
It
just the
really,
experience in
yeah.
general.
Yes.
People's experience of it isn't as positive.
Yes, absolutely. The experience really does matter with everything being safe, right? Yeah. Yeah, just thinking about the emotional experience, right? That's like not necessarily on people's list of, what they're looking for in birth. So it's really important to like say that, right? It is really, really important. I always wonder, and this is, yeah, I wonder, asking for any doctor, policymaker, anyone out there, possibly listening, like, why aren't why isn't the medical field looking at any of this? Like their outcomes get worse and worse, and like we're getting these reports every year that are just like everyone's doing worse, and all of these disturbances are going up, and these doctors truly want to save lives and do the best, but they're just not looking. Like what's happening? Just want to put that out there.
I think one of the things that we know in about medicine is that when a new truth becomes apparent in evidence, that the average amount of time it takes is almost 2 decades before that is taken into practice across the board. So you're going to have new evidence and you're going to have some early adopters. We all know those doctors and you're just like, "Oh, I hope I end up with that doctor because they're so awesome." And
Mhm.
those early adopters and doctors that are actually open to change as well.
Yep.
And we tend to see a lot more of that in the more high risk hospitals, right? Because they are dealing with unique and challenging situations more often. And so
Mhm.
they're more open to like looking and changing and pivoting. And
Yep.
what's the newest thing that we've learned about? We tend to see less change in the more rural hospitals, the level 1 hospitals, where it's just consistent practice. There are very few doctors. There's very little change of new doctors coming in and talking about new ways of doing things. And then there's just the reality in medicine that it's often harder for a new doctor to come in and change things, right?
Yeah.
There's
Like
this
following a path.
yeah, there's this unspoken and spoken thing about just like knowing your place in the medical system. And that's both hierarchical, right? And linear as well.
Yeah. Even, like, I can't even name it because it's too horrific, like, even just thinking of, like, my neuroanatomy course that I took in undergrad, the acronym to remember the, cranial nerves is so disgusting and misogynistic. It comes from the medical schools that even just knowing that, I'm like, "Okay, that's what we're dealing with."
Wow.
Like, terrifying.
Yeah.
But at the time, I was like, "Oh, yeah, that's a great way to remember it." And, now I have some life experience, I can look at it another way. So you can also see how, like, people go through and they're just following everything, right? Culture, practice, everything like that. But we definitely need to make some change. I talk about sometimes, like, I'm writing a new book, I kind of just skip birth, to be totally honest, in it, and I just kind of say something really terrible is probably gonna happen at your birth. I wish for people to have, like, if you have a beautiful birth, like, I wish for everybody to have that, and they happen, but, like, I've been to a bunch of births, you've been to a million births. We see that, like, a mother's and father's confidence can be crushed with a tiny phrase, a tiny gesture, all the way to, like, levels of violence that can happen too, right? So I don't think it's very few come out unscathed. And also people will come out with these experiences, they don't know how they impact them. Like they'll tell me their birth and then, I'm not gonna ruin the story for them, but I'm like, oh my God. Like the staff told them that their baby was in danger when they weren't. And what's the impact there, right? Like everything has, so I do kind of skip it and I kind of say, that's a detour to your connection and to your relationship to your baby, but you can get back on the highway, you can get back on the road on the next turnpike and connect with your baby and continue. So I would love, because people here will be, pregnant listening, they'll be going on to have their second, third plus, babies. If you could wave a magic wand, Stephanie, you know better than anyone. What hospital practices would you change? Like in that context of like keeping things flowing, keeping the birth hormones flowing, keeping babies together with their parents in that realm. what comes to your mind? And I know you can't do everything, but we'll do a few.
I mean, do I get one magic wand wave
Yeah,
for birth and
you
one
can
for
change, like, a
postpartum?
bunch of things. Whatever you wanna do. Magic for a day.
What I would wish for is for care providers to magically realize that they can tailor care to each individual.
Hmm.
It really doesn't seem that big of an ask. It
Yeah.
doesn't seem like that big of an ask to me, but it really is. And whether the issue is education and training, whether the issue is the liability aspect
Mhm.
of of requiring policies and procedures and checkboxes and lists and all these things, or a combination, I guess, of all of them. But this thing where a client comes in and says, I don't want this thing," and everybody freaks out.
Right.
"I don't want an IV." "What do you mean you don't want an IV? Everybody gets an IV." Is it really that hard to just not give that person an IV because they're refusing the IV? So my magic wand in birth would be customized care to that individual.
Mhm.
In the postpartum period, I would wish for more, and I'm sure you're probably gonna feel the same about this, but more protection, more encouragement, more whatever the word I need here around skin to skin and parent baby contact,
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah. What is that looking like these days? Like, I know the skin to skin there was actually something new that came out, right? Like, saying offering like, they can't do studies anymore where no skin to skin is, um, one of the treatment groups because it's unethical not to give it.
Oh
It was
my,
A new Cochrane review, yeah,
wow! I hadn't heard
which
that
is
one yet.
it's pretty new, it's pretty new. So, yeah, what does that look like? So, we know it's there, like, I often see, it's like, "We did skin to skin, check it off the list, we did it for 60 minutes, and so it's done," right? We want more than that for sure, but, yeah, I'm curious, like, what is that looking like in the hospitals now?
I will tell you, I remember teaching this class, oh, honestly, more than 15 years ago. At that time, childbirth educators were teaching about early skin to skin, undisturbed skin to skin for the first hour, and it was revolutionary, even though
Mhm.
kangaroo care was discovered in the late 70s,
Yep,
right, as
yep,
beneficial. And so I was teaching this class, and between classes, these clients went and talked to their doctor, had an appointment, came back, and they said to me, they went to their doctor and they said, "Hey, here's something that we just learned about. We want to do undisturbed skin to skin care for the first hour with our baby." And he folded his arms like this and leaned back in his chair and he said, "Why would you want to do that?" And, I think they
wow,
hesitantly regurgitated what I had taught them around temperature and bonding and feeding and all the things.
yep,
And he's like, "Well, then hopefully you get another doctor on call that day because I don't do that."
wow,
And they switched doctors. So I remember that story. I still remember those people. And I was just like, wow, way to go. Okay.
yeah,
But that was only like 15 years ago. That sentiment from a doctor who was like, "Why would you want to do that?"
mhm,
To where we are today, which is when someone says that now, it's expected by the staff that they're going to ask for that. There are many hospitals that is the practice. So we're seeing a lot of that. And one of the things that's different between that and all of the other things people have been talking about for 15 years that haven't changed, right? One of the biggest reasons for that is public health got involved in that discussion. So
cool,
there was a really big push from public health departments to do skin to skin as well.
mhm,
And I really wonder if that is what made the difference on that being adopted more
right,
smoothly, more easily.
because 'cause they're kind of on the inside of the system
I
in a
guess.
way or something.
Yeah.
Super interesting, and you know what? I feel like, of course, we want so many things optimized and changed, but if we're just gonna pick one to start with, that's probably a good one, right? Like if things have been rough and disturbed before, that's the way back, right? To be connected through.
It's a real good one. It's a real good one.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then other supports for babies to be close to their mothers and parents postpartum. Like, what's that looking like in the hospitals now? Like the kind of rooming in, the sometimes like I know sometimes there's like a bedside little bassinet. Like, is that any progress there?
I mean, I think we could still do better, than what we're doing in that regards. I know one of the things I hear a lot is a parent that has the baby, sleeping next to them, even if the parent is awake and the baby's beside them in the bed,
Yeah.
and everybody freaks out about that,
Yes.
right? And I
Yeah.
and I get that there's a safety element for people in that, but again, it's you know, we're trying to be quote unquote safe and not allow people to be next to their baby. But again, in the mammalian world, being next to your baby is the normal response.
Yes.
So how can we make that more feasible, more safe, right? Rather than
Mhm.
disallowing it. What's the harm reduction model on that, I guess, is my question.
It's such a good question because so many conversations I've had about this recently were from people saying like there was no other place for my baby. Like either like their animal, in intuition, instinct was so strong that was like, I am not like this baby will not leave me. Or even just the baby's screaming. Like if the baby's anywhere else, they're screaming, right? So
And the parent who had a cesarean who doesn't have support people in the hospital and their baby's crying and they can't get up to get their baby and they're buzzing the button and the nurse doesn't come for 20 minutes. Like think of the nervous system activation of that situation. You want to go to your baby and you've had major abdominal surgery and struggling to get up to get your baby. Like how backwards is that? So
yes.
either more support or the easier access to baby,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely. And there are models, right? Like, you're asking what's the risk? Like they exist. Like they are in a bunch of hospitals, right?
Yeah.
So it's really time to catch up.
Yeah.
For sure, for
Yeah.
sure. So that's great. Well, I mean, that's actually interesting to follow up with. How do the people around the mom or birthing person, how are like what's the best way for them to be a layer of support around, postpartum?
I'll tell you, here's one of my favorite activities I do with my clients. So I draw 4 circles on a piece of paper. And the top 2 circles, this represents a 24-hour clock. And I get people to draw in that circle to kind of put lines. How many hours of that are you sleeping? How many hours are you working? Are you doing groceries, walking the dog, going to the gym, showering, making your food? And I get people to kind of divide up the average 24-hour period.
Mhm.
If there are 2 people in the relationship, then I get them to do each one.
Yep.
And then we do 2 more circles along the bottom, and this represents life after baby. And so if the birthing person is planning on breastfeeding, then, well, we cut that in half because that's about 12 hours of every day. The next most critical thing is sleep for well-being, for recovery, for mental health protection, everything. So the next thing is how many hours does that person need to sleep? Some people are amazing with 6, some people need 10.
Yeah.
So what's the next? Okay, now how many of those things you used to do up here fit in that tiny little sliver that's left after feeding and sleep?
Yeah.
And inevitably, in most instances, there are items that birthing person used to do that no longer fit in this time clock. So where do they go? Do they go over to the partner's new time clock? And is that reasonable for them too? I mean, if they're working 12 hours a day, then okay, like what gives? Or is this the time where they go, they look at this and this is best done prenatally before there's actually a problem, right?
Yep.
They look at each other and they go, you know what? Maybe we do say yes to one of the moms coming over, like one of the new grandmas coming
Yep.
over,
Yep.
for the first couple weeks. Maybe we hire a cleaning service if that's in the budget. If we don't have a budget, maybe we rely on our community, on our church family, or whatever else they have in
Yep.
in
Meal
their
trains and all
Yeah.
kinds of things.
So it's like being creative and thinking through what might be the challenges when we can do that prenatally versus now we're sleep deprived, we're recovering, we're in pain, we don't know what the hell we're doing. Literally, the most incredible and transformative experience of our lives has just happened. And now we're arguing around who's going to make dinner or who's going to do laundry. Like,
Yeah.
so planning, and so the partner initiating, family members initiating this conversation and helping with this planning in advance is, I think, really helpful.
Yeah. Just being able to receive is sometimes a hurdle for people. So I'm like,
Yeah.
let's surrender to that, the
Yes.
receiving. And for anyone who doesn't have a baby yet who's listening, it might sound strange that you won't have time to walk your dog or clean or load and unload the dishwasher or do laundry because as a free human, those things, you don't think about those things. They're just like, yeah, no problem. Like, get it all done. But that after you do that exercise, that is like beautiful. And trust us, right? Like those simple tasks are not simple once the
Yeah.
baby comes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
now
love
you're trying
that.
to navigate in conflict versus navigating with logic and calm, in advance. But I think you touched on a really important point is people having a lot of trouble accepting support, accepting help. Oh, maybe if I could wave a magic wand on something, that would be it too, is
Yes.
allow yourself to be doted on, allow yourself to be supported, allow
Yeah.
yourself to be held emotionally, physically, allow. Like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
this is a
I
lost
agree.
art.
I agree. People can be and I felt that way too postpartum. I had to also surrender to it, to like, yeah, to just receive without having to take care of, immediately take care of the other person, right? Like our relationships have long timelines, there's reciprocity, everything works out, but you can be vulnerable and you can be grateful and to receive from those around you, even if that feels like a tall order. Just start to practice it,
Yeah.
especially in those early days.
Yeah. I mean, I'm
Well,
really good at that now. Someone wants to do something for me. I'm just like, yep.
mhm.
You
I
know?
know the joys of,
Why did
you
it take
know,
until my late 40s to get good at
I
that? I
was
should
gonna
have
say, I was
started
like,
that in
maybe
my
I
20s.
figured it out at 40, but maybe it was also like the full transformation into being a mother and a more mature woman. And sometimes I just think we don't necessarily have the practice of receiving. And sometimes not that, like, we don't like truly love ourselves as deeply as we should. And have think that we're worth it or important enough for like others to be pouring into us. And this is, as like so many things in this transition, like that's one of the lessons to be learned that you really are worth it.
The two comments I hear the most from people, the number one comment I hear is, I didn't know the baby was going to want to be on me all the time. Just like,
Yes.
whoa, where did you think a baby's natural habitat is? Media, babies are in a bassinet, right?
Yeah.
Wrong. The
Yep.
second most common thing that I hear from people is the idea that they thought they would know what to do and that everyone else seems to make it look easy. And that is
Mhm.
the biggest lie. And it comes from one thing, the fact that we live in a nuclear family and
Yeah.
that we haven't seen other people parenting a newborn.
Yes.
Because the truth is, every single person who's raising a newborn is thinking it's hard. No one is thinking this is a cakewalk. Everybody is questioning themselves, their ability, their capacity. How is this so hard? How come I'm not good at this? And that is the biggest load of bull. Everybody's feeling that way. So stop looking at movies and thinking that's real life. I know they know it's not real life, but in their mind, it's translating to, I'm not doing a good job because everyone else makes it look easy.
Yeah.
That is fake news.
Yeah, I love that. And it is amazing how many people, the first baby they ever hold or see is their own. And that is not how humans, have existed for a long, 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 long time. Like,
Only 100 years of millennia that we have been around, only 100 years have we had this experience of more separation.
Yeah.
and not having a lot of experience watching other newborns. So that's a new
Yes.
thing for sure.
Absolutely. Like, you imagine you'd be, like, baby wearing and seeing a lot of breastfeeding and seeing, a new mother holding the baby all the time and being supported and having baths made for her and food and, all of the things, right? So it's good when we know.
Yeah, I mean, even in my lifetime, I think about it and, I come from a Portuguese background and I was quite young watching my aunt have her babies and she lived with my grandmother. And so I watched her be very supported. My grandmother made meals.
Yeah.
My aunt breastfed her baby. That was her job.
Yeah.
And so I did grow up seeing that as normal. And when I started having children, I really expected birth to be normal and easy. I expected breastfeeding to be normal and easy. I expected to be supported by other family members because that's what I had seen,
Yeah.
and I think that made a big difference for me for sure. And, hopefully, I mean, I've been talking about postpartum doulas for so long. When I first started offering postpartum doula services, we're talking 15-ish years ago. It was unheard of. No one even knew what that
Mhm.
was. And I wrote letters to all the doctors in my community explaining what a postpartum doula was and how it could be helpful.
Mhm.
Now, we can't keep enough doulas staffed in our agencies because it's so popular and has grown so much. But I used to have to teach what it was, in my little window of time.
Yeah. Oh, that makes me so happy. I wish, you know, for doula support for as many people that can possibly have it.
I
And
know.
it also looks like there's a lot more. I know you have pioneered some like accessible routes to having a doula. And I know of a lot more in my community in LA. I hear them talking a lot about insurance covering it now and all kinds of things like that. So
Yeah. More and more insurance
may it
companies
grow.
agreeing. I mean, in the US, we see a lot more Medicaid coverage. I mean, there's just a lot of advancement. And of course, there's lots to do and further to go, but we are headed in the right direction.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you so much for being here. I was so excited to speak with you. For people curious about your trainings and all of your endeavors, where can they find you?
Yeah. In the United States, doulaschool.com. In Canada, doulatraining.ca. For those interested in becoming doulas or doulas that are interested in continuing education. We add 1,000 students a year, which is amazing and testament to the incredible growth of this profession. It's amazing.
Wow, that is so exciting. Congratulations to you and to the world for all
Yeah.
these amazing doulas coming through.
Thanks
Wonderful.
for
Well,
having
thank
me.
you again, Steph. I'll talk to you later.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.